Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Let's spend a few minutes setting our motivation and why we are here tonight. And so thinking about this opportunity to share and listen to the Dharma that we have in this precious human life, to consider that the causes for a precious human life are quite remarkable. And to realize that we, in some previous life or lifetimes, this merely labeled I, has created the causes and conditions for us to be here tonight. So that previously labeled I, or many previous labeled I's, would have had to have practiced pure ethical conduct, refraining from harm, cultivating and gathering virtue and benefiting others. They would have had to have practiced the 6 far-reaching practices of generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stabilization, and wisdom. And they would have had to have made deep aspirations to be able to meet the Dharma and qualify teachers in their future lives. So sitting here tonight in this precious human life with so many of the, if not all of the conducive circumstances to practice, we have shelter, we have food and clothing, we have our mental capacity, we have physical capacity, we have qualified teachers in our life. The fact that we even have interest in the Dharma is very rare. We have supportive friends, we have Sangha in our lives. And so to take this moment to simply sort of bask in the good fortune, knowing the incredible hard work of this mind stream of ours in previous lives, and to be very inspired by the fact that those very virtuous karmic imprints are still alive and well in this mind stream of this life, and to be very inspired by that. And so tonight, as we share the Dharma, let us appreciate the opportunity and hopefully continue in this life to create those very same causes, to have many, many precious higher rebirths in the future, so that we can progress quickly along this bodhisattva path to awakening, and not only for our own long-term freedom from suffering, but also the long-term benefit and well-being of all living beings. Let's just sit with that incredible understanding to whatever level you can take that as where we are tonight is due to some incredible causes and conditions created by this mind of ours in previous lives. So I find that quite remarkable. A remarkable thought. It makes my mind really big and it brightens my mind. And in preparing for giving this talk tonight, I've been studying some notes from the teachings that Venerable Chögyön and Geshe Zopa gave on the 6 far-reaching practices. And in particular tonight, the second one on ethical conduct. And one of the things that came to me more clearly that has to do with the motivation that I sort of understood but not really is that bodhisattvas arise from causes. They don't just appear out of nowhere. Sometimes I have this kind of strange thinking that bodhisattvas are inherently existent. They've always kind of been bodhisattvas, and then one day they're just going to wake up and become inherently existent Buddhas. So thinking about the causes and conditions that we must have created in previous lives to be where we are tonight, that bodhisattvas are where they are today due to the causes and conditions that they practiced over many, many lives. And that at one time they were just like us, under the control of afflictions and karma, cycling through rebirth after rebirth after rebirth, and having the same self-grasping at the I and everything around them, just like we do. So that has been helpful for me reading and studying this week on seeing the causality of how Buddhas and bodhisattvas come into being. And that they met the Buddha's teaching somewhere along that endless cycle since beginningless time. And just like us, they began to create the causes and conditions to be where they are now. And that there's nothing magical about that. You know, they received the same teachings that we receive. They have done purification of the destructive karmic imprints and the negative actions of body, speech, and mind, similar to us. They have practiced the Dharma as their teachers have instructed. They've made offerings. They've generated bodhicitta. They have looked at the disadvantages of cyclic existence. And now they are experiencing the results of those efforts and still growing moment by moment towards Buddhahood, more and more quickly perhaps than we are, and taking into consideration sentient beings and benefiting them as they go. So they're not out there far away, unrelated to us. They are very much connected to us because they were just like us once upon a time. So I've been finding this quite inspirational as I've been looking at ethical conduct and the 6 far-reaching practices. And that the 6 far-reaching practices of bodhisattvas contains pretty much everything that one needs to become awakened. And that's what they followed, and that's what we're trying to be inspired to follow in their footsteps. And that so that sometime in the future, however long that is, we become Buddhas just as they are quickly in the process of becoming Buddhas. And so tonight I wanted to just have us put this mindset on that we're kind of bodhisattvas in training. Now maybe at the real basic level, at least I am, but to see us having a very strong karmic connection to them, because they were like us once upon a time. And so I want to have us all hold that kind of tonight as a source of inspiration, because sometimes thinking about how amazing they are and how amazing their minds are and how deep the bodhicitta and the understanding of emptiness are, I can fall into discouragement, or I'm never going to be there, or it's too far, it's too long. But, you know, they're doing it, and we've got the conducive circumstances of this life to be able to build some momentum and create the causes and conditions to be able to be doing it too. So to just hold that in our minds tonight. And then to become a Buddha, where we have the endless capacity to benefit all beings, we practice to complete the 2 collections of merit and wisdom. So this is the fundamental bodhisattva practice. So the collection of merit, which is on the method side of the path, we cultivate an aspiring mind that is absolutely dedicated to virtue. And this virtuous states of mind that grow enhance everything that one does, whether it's giving to others or practicing patience or looking at the disadvantages of cyclic existence or self-centeredness, is that this inspiring type of mind dedicated to cultivating virtue really enhances and enriches the mind to be able to have deeper understandings of how to do that the best. And that it purifies the mind, the method side of the path. It makes the mind clearer and stronger and more concentrated so that over time it can have deeper understandings of the Buddha's teachings up to the point where it will eventually realize emptiness. So there's a progression as far as the more merit we accumulate, the more good qualities that we generate. Therefore the mind becomes stronger, more purified. And then the method side of the path also enables wisdom to increase and to deepen, and becomes a very powerful antidote at the point when we are eradicating the afflictive obscurations and the cognitive obscurations farther on down the path, as Venerable has been teaching us. And the collection of wisdom, which is the wisdom side of the path, this starts off in the very beginning, just being able to discern what to abandon and what to cultivate, to be able to see when the self-centered thought is running the show, and to be able to apply antidotes to not only that state of mind, but also any of the afflictions that arise. So the wisdom side of the path begins to build antidotes, begins to build the deeper understandings of the disadvantages of cyclic existence, the determination to be free, and deepens its realizations as time goes on of impermanence and of bodhicitta and of eventually the nature of reality. So these two collections of both merit and wisdom can be expanded and are contained or practiced within the 6 far-reaching practices. That is the best, surest way to be able to increase those collections. The other thing that is very important also for us to realize as we are bodhisattvas in training, practicing the 6 far-reaching attitudes, is that compassion underlies the motivation to engage in these practices. And that generating bodhicitta and putting that into the practice is where then we really start leading a life as a bodhisattva does. So the bodhicitta and the compassion are the sort of the fuel, sort of the basis and the foundation of the bodhisattva practice when practicing the 6 far-reaching attitudes. So to keep those in mind. It keeps the mind soft, it keeps the mind vast and very big, and we can be able to then do the practices with some kind of strength, some kind of strong intention on why we're doing them in the first place. Also to remember that each far-reaching practice is a state of mind. It's not the set of behaviors that follow the state of mind. It is the motivation, the intention that drives and propels all of our actions. And so the practice is a mental mind training, pretty much. And we try to engage in all the 6 practices as best as we can, you know, sort of concurrently from the very beginning. But the Buddha set them up in a way that they are done in a sequence, beginning with the easiest to the more difficult, and they are practiced preferably in order, although we try to, as part of our daily practice, to practice generosity and joyous effort. And so it's really helpful to understand the reason why they were listed in this way. I've always kind of found that curious. Why was generosity first but not joyous effort? So this is the way that they kind of work together. So generosity precedes ethical conduct because attachment to possessions and greed to have more and better are obstacles to ever wanting to abandon the 10 non-virtues. So as long as we're hooked into attachment to material possessions, sense pleasures, praise, good reputation, it really becomes, and wanting bigger and better and having a very comparing mind, is that that kind of mind becomes quite an obstacle to ever wanting to abandon the 10 non-virtues, because the 10 non-virtues coincide very directly with the attachment to possessions and reputation and sense pleasures and wanting praise. So to practice generosity is to sort of unclench our tightness around having things and to start turning our mind at the sheer joy of giving. And so that kind of loosens the grasp of attachment. And then by doing so, then the generous mind, the mind to want to do it purely, to want to do it with joy, to want to do it even in difficult circumstances, then becomes more readily available to actually be able to do. Then ethical conduct precedes fortitude, because by practicing non-harm and cultivating virtue and benefiting others, we cultivate these very wholesome motivations for our actions. We start to control the afflictions. And then as a result of that, then we are able to be a little bit calmer and a little bit clearer when we are right in front of either suffering or harm that's coming at us. Rather than going into the reactive, afflictive state, we're able to remain somewhat calm and clear in the face of harm and suffering. So by having our minds, already knowing how our minds operate and how to be able to train it to refrain and to cultivate virtue, we have kind of a strengthening of our minds in these difficult situations. Then fortitude is needed and precedes joyous effort, because the calm, the internal calm, enables us then to connect and maintain with joy, maintain the joyous effort that is required to have in our minds to be able to progress along the path. So fortitude makes our minds very calm and clear and strong. And because it's calm and clear and stronger, then the joy can arise rather than this kind of heaviness, I can't do it, lack of confidence, the inability to see clearly and to stay centered in oneself in the face of difficulties. So then the joy becomes a little bit easier to call up in our minds. Then the joyous effort precedes meditative stabilization because, Zopa and I were just talking the other day, we are now going into our 7th 3-month retreat together as Dharma friends, and we're still waiting for the meditative stabilization to occur. So if we don't have joyous effort in our relationship to trying to get our minds to stabilize and focus on a virtuous object for more than 3 or 4 seconds, if we don't have the joyous effort, we're not going to be able to ever cultivate that, because it does not come quickly and it requires a continuous effort over time. And then the meditative stabilization is essential for developing sharp and clear wisdom that can penetrate the meaning of any of the Buddhist teachings. So by having a mind that is focused, concentrated, that we can take any of the Buddhist teachings and really delve into the deeper meaning of them and eventually use that wisdom, use that stabilized mind to realize the ultimate nature of reality. So the 6 far-reaching practices kind of, sit on top of each other. They interface, which I will share later on, but they also very much grow on top of one another. And it's always helpful to kind of keep this in mind on how that happens. So last week we heard from Venerable Tarpa about generosity, this far-reaching practice that arises from the mind that gives possessions, body, and virtue without any taint, any notion of wanting to get something back in return, which I find to be one of the most remarkable things, to be able to give something to benefit another being without any sense of, am I going to get something back? Am I going to get praise? Is this going to increase my reputation? Am I going to get a gift? To be able to do that absolutely without any strings attached. So letting go of the thoughts of my and mine helps to reduce the need to then lie, steal, kill, harsh words, divisive speech, covetousness, ill will. So the practice of generosity really does help as far as growing the far-reaching practice of ethical conduct. So there's a quote from Shantideva that sums it up for me as far as ethical conduct goes. Even those who wish to find happiness and overcome misery will wander with no aim or meaning if they do not comprehend the nature of the mind, the paramount significance of the Dharma. This being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well. Without the discipline of guarding the mind, what use are other disciplines? So without having the integrity of ethical conduct, the other far-reaching practices will not be able to be utilized by us to propel us along the path in the most beneficial way. And we'll go through that later on too. So the far-reaching practice of ethical conduct is a mind that has abandoned all thoughts of harming others, and for a bodhisattva, a state of mind that has relinquished entirely the self-centered thought. There are 3 types of ethical conduct, and once again, there's sometimes a lot of wisdom in this list thing, and they occur in a very fixed sequence, and once again you'll see how they grow from each other. So the first of there are 3. There's refraining from harm, which then establishes the foundation for engaging in virtue. All right, so by controlling our mind and its propensity to get caught up in the self-centered thought and just go out there and not think about what we're doing as far as harming others. If we can refrain from harm, establishing the foundation for virtuous actions, which in turn enables us to work for the welfare of sentient beings. Because we've gotten our minds subdued, we're thinking about virtue, we're thinking about, well, besides just benefiting myself, what can I do to help others? So once again, this is a sequence. They grow on top of themselves. They grow and enhance each other. And if we are unable to control our minds, this is something from Lama Tsongkhapa, as far as the state of it from which we act, then physical and verbal actions don't have much meaning, no matter how virtuous they may look on the outside to others. So without having the motivation that is very clear and clean, we can be putting off all sorts of what look like virtuous activities. They won't have much meaning because the intention behind them is not in line with the action. So we'll start with the first type of ethical conduct, which refers to a person making a decision not to harm, and that then motivates them to refrain from harming. So the way we get started with this is to examine our intentions behind our actions and to increase our awareness of why we do what we do, why we do what we say. Now, I don't know about you, but there's a lot of times that I have absolutely no idea what my motivation is. That's one thing. The second thing is that I find out after I have acted or spoke that my motivation was totally cattywampus and filled with a lot of self-serving ideas, or it's a mix of really wanting to help but not being very skillful and quite a bit of self-centered what's in it for me also. So it's very, I find it a little bit, I mean, increasing my awareness has been helpful, but I find sometimes that I'm not aware at all of what my motivation is. So the Buddha was very wise and skillful in showing us how to start figuring this out. So he used our tendency to look at how we do things and how we help others and how we ask ourselves, what's in it for me? So sometimes we do this from a rather self-centered, self-serving sort of way, but we have quite a very strong tendency as human beings to really look at things and say, okay, is this going to work for me or is this not going to work for me? And we can do this in a worldly sense, and we can do this in a very virtuous sense. So when an opportunity arises in our lives to act or speak, the bottom line is, will this make me happy or is this going to bring suffering? We can be very aware of the thought or not so aware of it, but it's kind of the driving motivation for everything that most living beings do. So, and so what the Buddha is wanting is sort of helping us in his skillful way, is saying by using, just checking in and saying, is what I'm about to do going to bring me peace of mind, a sense of ease? Is it going to help me to get a little bit closer to my deepest aspirations, or is it going to put me in the totally opposite direction from that and cause some sort of harm, some sort of discontent, some sort of remorse after I'm done? So he's trying to use our tendency to judge and weigh things, the advantages and disadvantages in worldly life, and to bring that into our Dharma practice and be able to become a little bit more aware of why we do what we do and why we say what we say. So in the beginning, even if we just set our intention not to harm other living beings, it is an extremely powerful intention, and it actually has no self-centeredness in it. That's that very simple and powerful motivation, may I not harm. There is no self-centered thought in that. That is very clean and clear and very virtuous. It will bring peace to ourselves and others. So that's the first place we start. So in the beginning, this is Geshe Zopa, we won't be able to inspect and catch the motivations, much less every action and comment that we make. But we can begin to recognize and try and avoid the most harmful, which are the 10 non-virtues: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, gossiping, maliciousness, covetousness, and wrong view. And as one's practice becomes more consistent and sincere, we will become accustomed to checking in with our minds on what we are doing and why we're doing it. It will become a little bit more natural for us to be able to say, and I do this a little bit more now than I used to, is that I'm catching things a little bit better now, but even if I don't, my awareness has grown enough that I can say, I can catch and go, that was pretty, Samke. You know, that wasn't really what you meant. You said that, but you didn't really mean it. And that I didn't even see it coming. I didn't even see my angry mind go out there and blah on somebody unsuspecting. And that I catch myself, and what I'm trying to train myself now is to just encourage myself. I saw it, I didn't catch it before it came out, but I'm going to make a stronger effort the next time, and to be very sensitive to find out what are the situations and the people that trigger these sort of impulsive reactions where the afflictions come up in the mind and I open my mouth or I move in a non-virtuous, unskillful way. And if we feel uneasy, or if our heart hurts after we do something, Geshe Sopa says that's really good. Because what's happening is that we've got enough virtue in our minds that we're actually starting to get a little bit of a sensitivity from our own motivations, our own behavior. And that's where we make the determination to really say, okay, this is the regret. You know, that little hurt in the heart when we do something, we go, oh, what was I thinking of? That wasn't very skillful. I think I just hurt somebody's, I think I just harmed somebody here. It's that feeling in the heart that hurts. That's the kind of regret. If we get that, when we speak and we do actions, that's a very good sign that our awareness is growing and that we are really getting somewhere as far as virtue. We understand what harming feels like in our minds. And Geshe Sopa says that is very, very good. So then, we can do our best to cultivate ethical conduct within ourselves. And one of the things he also said, which was really quite lovely, is that here we are doing our best to practice ethical conduct, to refrain from harm. And then we look at the world and we see all the suffering and we see all this harming. And it's like this wish, may all beings be free of suffering, may they be safe from harm. And as much as we wish that, it's not possible. I mean, the Buddhas were never able to release all beings from suffering and keep them safe from harm. He says that even the Buddhas couldn't do that. But what he does say is that our consistent loving attitude that will completely, at some point in time, overcome the wish to harm is very powerful. This is the part of the far-reaching practice, is the motivation, is the consistent loving attitude that wishes not to harm. The point is not whether beings are free from harm. It is whether one truly wants to avoid harming them. That's the bodhisattva practice. By subduing the self-centered thought that only cares about what benefits ourselves and the heck with everybody else, by subduing that, as well as growing our awareness and our wisdom and our sensitivity to what the states of our mind are, the verbal and the physical actions will follow. And it will change the world. That's the part that Geshe Sopa also wants to say, is that, we're these little pebbles in the water, and we will drop in, and even though we can't alleviate all the suffering and keep sentient beings safe, we will make a huge difference as time goes on. And there was a verse in Engaging in Bodhisattva Deeds which kind of states what Geshe Sopa has taught here. The killing of fish and others has not been completely eradicated anywhere. The perfection of ethical conduct is explained as obtaining the mind set wanting to avoid harm. So that's the realistic part. That's the bodhisattva practice. And that the practice of refraining from harm is of critical importance to bodhisattvas. It is not separate from their practice, it is the basis of it. They know deeply how their physical and verbal actions have a direct or indirect impact on others, and so they guard them with their very lives. So once again, this is where bodhisattvas in training like us can aspire to guard our actions and our speech as if we were guarding our own lives. Then we are trying as best as we can to emulate them. And so then what comes up is, so where do we get into trouble when trying not to harm? What mental states really trip us up? And Venerable taught this a number of times. She taught it last year, and I really found them very, very helpful. So there are 4 of them that seem to be the biggest troublemakers. So these are the 4 ways ethical errors occur. First is not knowing what to abandon and what to practice. This is just the very gross form of ignorance, not knowing. We don't know the 10 non-virtues. We don't know the 10 virtues. We don't know the precepts that we've taken, whether they're the lay precepts or the Mahayana precepts or the 8 pratimoksha precepts or the monastic precepts, the bodhisattva vows. We don't have them in our minds. We're not clear. We took them and we don't even remember them. So the antidote to this first one that trips us up is to take the time to study and learn about them, to study the precepts we've taken, to know what pledges and commitments we've taken, to know the 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues so we can call them to mind, to have them as part of our mental tool belt. So that's the first one, is this general kind of ignorance of not knowing. The second one of the ethical errors is the lack of respect for these precepts and for these virtuous, actions of body and speech. So not thinking that ethical conduct is important, so there's a complacency in keeping them. The antidote is to develop conviction and respect for the precepts. There is a line in the Guru Puja that I've always found quite powerful, is that it says, by keeping our commitments and pledges, they are the source of powerful attainments and realizations. So having the lack of respect for them becomes a huge obstacle for our ever being able to have any realizations. There's so much based on this ethical conduct that if we don't keep them, we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot. The third one is carelessness. Okay, now we're getting into a little bit even more trouble. Is that we know the 10 non-virtues, but we ignore them in our daily life, and we have no interest in monitoring our behavior. All right, so we're getting careless. We don't care if what we do is virtuous or not virtuous. We don't care about the effects our actions have on ourselves and others. And we easily follow whatever impulsive thoughts we have. It's just like Venerable said, we're just kind of getting pulled by the nose from whatever is in our minds. We just go and do it without thinking of any type of consequences. So the antidote is to be careful and conscientious in our actions, be mindful of our precepts, clearly know what our body, speech, and mind are doing, and then make modifications in our behavior by noting that. So you can see as these errors occur that they're going from not knowing to being kind of disrespectful, being careless, and now we've gone through all of those, and now our minds are unsubdued. The fourth one is strong afflictions. We've disregarded, we haven't studied, the respect isn't there, we haven't tried to monitor our behavior. So the afflictions arise, we have no mindfulness or introspective alertness. The afflictions arise and we're totally overrun and we're out of control. And that's where ethical conduct basically goes down the tubes. So the antidotes are learn and apply the antidotes to the afflictions. So there are a few samples of these, and you want to be able to catch the afflictions before they are pulling us around by the nose, because then the antidotes really can't be used. So we're trying to deal with them before they get too out of control. But anyway, here are some of the ideas. To counteract detachment is to contemplate impermanence, that no matter what we are attached to is changing moment by moment, arising and ceasing, and is eventually going to cease to exist. That it goes with body, possessions, reputation, praise, opinions, ideas. Fortitude is the remedy to anger. Knowing that in the face of harm. And we really need to practice keeping our minds clear and calm, so that when people are coming at us with their own afflictive states of mind, that we're not throwing gasoline on the flame. The rejoicing is an antidote to jealousy. There's this part that is in, I think it was Mind Training Like Rays of the Sun. Here we have this great aspiration to benefit all sentient beings. And a sentient being comes along that is experiencing good fortune. And we're so pissed off. It's like here we have done absolutely nothing to have them be experiencing some sort of joy and some sort of benefit in their lives, and jealousy arises instead of rejoicing. So here's a perfect example of, if we're going to make the aspiration that we want to benefit others, when we see them being benefited, when we see them experiencing fortune, is to just say, yes, all right. Meditating on precious human life and the Buddha are excellent against depression. I have used this in a number of times over the years. Is looking at this incredible opportunity that we have. And then breathing meditation calms the mind whenever doubt, restlessness, or that kind of proliferating nomtok that Venerable talks about, this kind of talking to ourselves and just driving ourselves crazy and all this doubt and restlessness coming up. Breathing meditation. And as it is said in the 8 verses of thought transformation, in all actions I will examine my mind. The moment a disturbing attitude arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly confront and avert it. So those are the 4 things that get us into trouble. So the more that we are aware of these and seek to counteract them, the more peaceful will be our sort of outward, what we call demeanor, and the pure will be our ethical conduct. So we use mindfulness, we use introspection, we use self-respect and consideration for others to close the doors to these errors that get us into so much trouble. So that's the first type of ethical conduct, refraining from harm. This is common to both the fundamental vehicle and the Mahayana vehicle. Bodhisattvas practice this. They are always aware of their actions. So if we're going to emulate them, we do our best to try to follow in their footsteps by seeing the advantages and disadvantages clearly and trying to keep our body, speech, and mind on the wholesome side. Okay, so that's the first, refraining from harm. The next type of ethical conduct is translated as gathering virtue, which takes every opportunity possible to enhance the collections of method and wisdom in order to progress along the path. So this is just the whole idea of gathering virtue, opening up our arms and keeping our hearts open. There's just this way to just collect and gather. And this is something that we can cultivate daily, and there are different ways of doing this. We try and bring into our practice the virtuous qualities and states of mind that we haven't cultivated yet. So we had a group discussion a few weekends ago on sharing the Dharma on which qualities do we think we have some good qualities that we have strengths in, and which are the ones that we don't have that we would like to cultivate. So that's one of the ways that we can practice gathering virtue. The second one is to make strong efforts so that the good qualities and the constructive states of mind that we have already cultivated don't degenerate. So there's kind of a protection of them. And then the third one is that we actually want to strengthen and nourish those. Okay, so those are kind of the 3 ways that we gather virtue. So we do this by saving lives, protecting others' property, wise and kind sexual expression, speaking truthfully, bringing harmony to those that are in disharmony. When we meet others, to try to find something about them that we admire, to speak to them about that. Talking about things that are beneficial and helpful to others, being content with what we have, rejoicing in other good fortune, and cultivating deep faith in the 3 jewels, rebirth, karma, and awakening. So this is the way that we gather. And so bodhisattvas do this, they do it daily. And besides doing that, they also rely on their spiritual teachers. They listen to the Dharma. They share the Dharma. They eat and sleep. Karuna's got the undivided attention. Eat and sleep properly and practice all the other far-reaching practices. So that's how they accumulate merit. So once again, we can rely on our spiritual teachers, practice, take care of ourselves, take care of our bodies. So that's how we gather virtue. And so by gathering virtue, we also get to collect merit, which helps us to purify the obstacles in our minds that prevent us from understanding the Dharma, hindrances that get in the way of our progress. And then it also, the virtue helps us to really get our minds to where we sincerely want to benefit others. So this is where we get to live our lives in real joy, because we get to help others by the way that we live. See, a lot of the times is that we live one way, and then wanting to benefit others seems to be across the road somewhere. So by living our lives, refraining from harm and cultivating virtue, our life becomes benefit itself to others. So the third one, so now we have gotten some experience with the mind of not harming and creating virtue. And so then we can begin to really start to benefit others. That is not benefiting Karuna right now, Maitri. Refraining from harm. That is what we're trying to work on with our little kitties, is just to refrain from harm. We're going to work on that for them this life. Virtue, cultivating virtue, well, it might come. It may come along. There's some sweet times between the two of them. Okay, so we've gotten some experience with the mind of not harming. We are working on cultivating the virtuous qualities we do have, states of mind, trying to protect the ones we have and nourish the ones that we have. So by doing this, even though we do those two and benefiting others concurrently, by taking control and transforming our minds and working on subduing it, benefiting others comes a lot more easily. We are trying to generate bodhicitta, but it's helpful to have a good handle on our minds and actions, as well as softening our minds with virtue so that we can open up our hearts to others. And also, this is kind of from an experience I had this week working with a computer that was infected, is that another way to benefit others is that we have this spyware program running 24 hours a day on the self-centered attitude, so that we know when it's up and running. Okay, so spyware program, 24 hours, so that we know when it's engaged, because that is so much the greatest obstacle to benefiting others. Because as long as we're only thinking about what's in it for me, there's no way that we can include ever thinking about what's helpful to others. So we want to have some clarity and awareness on how to work and transform our minds. Get it strong, get it a little bit clear, so that when benefiting others is a little bit cleaner and a little bit more sincere and comes from bodhicitta motivation rather than the self-serving, self-centered type of motivation. So bodhisattvas, because remember we're bodhisattvas in training, do everything to benefit others. There are uncountable activities required to help the vast array and variety of sentient beings. So what the opportunities are endless, and where do we even begin? So these are just a few of the things that we can do to benefit others. And as I go through this list, if there are one or two of them that really ring true for you, it's just to keep them in mind. It's a good place to start with those that you feel connected to in your heart. And it, has a lot to do with what your interests are, what your predispositions are, what you consider to be your strengths. So the first one, once again, think of this as bodhisattvas think, is to help the suffering or the sick. So, there is numerous ways to do that. You can do it within your family, within your close circle, or go out into the community, or travel across the world. Give counsel and advice to those who have no way or means to help themselves. So this is where we really want to use some skillful means to be able to counsel. When we see people who are really stuck in a particular pattern or are confused about how best to take care of themselves and help themselves, and we do this as skillfully and as kindly as we can, knowing it may be received, it may not be received. Providing help to those who need to realize their goals, and we can do this in a worldly way. People who want to figure out ways how they can support themselves through college, thinking about ways that they can look for work, how they can, move the furniture. They're moving into a new house, and their family is not around, and give them a hand. But also, especially, to realize their dharma goals. Protecting those who are afraid, in danger, or about to be killed or injured. We do this quite a bit at the Abbey as far as taking care of all the little critters, making sure that they are put out of harm's way. We did this a few years ago when one of our neighbors had a mama sheep and 2 babies that they were going to slaughter. The Abbey actually offered to buy them, and we purchased them, and then we gave them to a organic farming vegetarian shepherdess who happened to need 2 little lambs and a mama sheep. So we did that. That is very much a bodhisattva practice. Comforting those who are grieving, who have lost family members, or have lost their status or their financial means. Helping the poor and needy. Providing for those who are in need of a place to stay, such as the poor, Dharma practitioners, and travelers. When I read this one, we do that here at the Abbey. We try to, we either set up places for people to stay who are coming to visit. I think this one also includes a little bit of wisdom. You're not going to want to go out downtown Spokane and see somebody who looks like they just got into town that you don't know and just say, come home, I'll feed you and give you a place to stay. So there has to be an element of wisdom so that we know, to keep ourselves safe, to help that person as much as we can, but to not benefit without having some wisdom. Help to reconcile those who quarrel and seek to be in harmony. I think this is a very powerful way to help others, and without taking sides, and to be able to help them so that they can come together. Supporting those who wish to practice the Dharma and act virtuously. That's a wonderful thing. Anything that we see in other people's behavior or ways of being that is virtuous and positive and beneficial is to really verbally and actively support them, encourage them, compliment them, praise them in a sincere way. I think people really appreciate feedback when they're doing a good thing, because our propensity is to point out faults. So to be able to get into the habit of pointing out all the good things. Stopping those who are acting negatively or about to do so. That one also requires some wisdom, when to be able to do that and when to be able to maybe ask for help. And then the last one, if somewhere along the line, when we attain some clairvoyant powers due to our strong, powerful meditative stabilization, we can use it to prove, not to increase our reputation or to get praise or money or possessions, but to prove the validity of the Dharma if all other methods fail, or to actually stop somebody else from doing harm. Okay, so somewhere down the line we will have that in our tool belt. So you can see by these opportunities to benefit that bodhisattvas must be spiritually wealthy, because they are starting to be seen as these wish-fulfilling gems, and how much their minds have got to be so spiritually full of wisdom, compassion, skillful means, bodhicitta, because look at all the things that they take such delight in doing. Look at all these sentient beings that they have to take care of and want to benefit. So their minds have to be so strong and so clear and so filled with bodhicitta. So we can see ourselves as bodhisattvas in training. And if we can even do 1 or 2 of the things on this list, and it also helps us get us out of our self-centered thought. As His Holiness says, if you're really struggling with self-centered thought, pity me, poor me, is go out and help somebody. Pick up the phone, go check on somebody who's been having a hard day. So find one of these things, and that will really help us. So, kind of working our way into the conclusion here, is that training here in the far-reaching practice of ethical conduct pretty much is watching our minds. See if there is the self-centered attitude behind our actions. If there is, Geshe Zopa says, we ask ourselves, what does it want me to do? What does it want me to say? And he says, if the attitude is rotten, no matter how one's words and actions seem nice, they will be negative. If one's attitude is wholesome and kind, then one's verbal and physical actions will be virtuous. So if we're ever going to be able to truly benefit others, we first have to learn how to refrain from harming them, just as the bodhisattvas practice. So this is the groundwork, this is the basis, but it's not enough. The bodhisattvas strive to do as many virtuous actions to benefit others as possible. And so what they do, which is a practice that sounds complicated but also sounds very powerful, is that they take ethical conduct and they interface it with the other far-reaching practices. And so I wanted to just share that on how the other practices actually go with ethical conduct. And you can do this with each one of the far-reaching practices. So the generosity of ethical conduct is practicing non-harm and virtue for the well-being of all. So by refraining from harming and doing virtue is a wonderful gift to the world. We're not creating the cause and conditions for any suffering. And that is a wonderful gift of generosity. The fortitude of ethical conduct is to be able to bear hardships and afflictions as we meet them. And in particular, within our own minds when the self-centered thought arises and really starts pounding us into submission and wanting us to do things that are not helpful. So fortitude helps us to bear the hardship, to have to meet that over and over again, to counteract it with antidotes, to see its disadvantages. And also being able to bear the hardship when we do receive harm from others. Fortitude comes in handy so we don't retaliate, so that we don't seek revenge. Very important. The joyous effort of ethical conduct is to rejoice and be happy about practicing virtue. To really take delight in it. Meditative stabilization of ethical conduct is to be always aware of our actions of body, speech, and mind. So this is the mindfulness and the introspective awareness, deepening our capacity to be able to do that. And then the wisdom of ethical conduct is the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of the doer, us, the object, the sentient being that we are refraining from harm or creating virtue on behalf of or benefiting, and the action. So that's the how wisdom combines with ethical conduct. So ethical conduct is the basis of all good qualities. It's like a field where generosity, fortitude, and so forth, so joyous effort, meditative stabilization, and wisdom are cultivated in this field. The crop of fortunate rebirths and the conducive circumstances and resources to practice ripens. And we will continue to practice life after life until attaining Buddhahood without being hindered by unfortunate rebirths. So for us to become bodhisattvas, to become Buddhas, a series of excellent rebirths is gained along the way. Higher rebirths are the result of ethical conduct. If there's any piece for us to take away, as much merit by practicing generosity, if we neglect ethical conduct, which is the primary cause of fortunate rebirths, we may experience the fruits of our generosity as being born as Maitri, who has the most wonderful, warm kitty life that any kitty could have, but she really has a hard time listening to the Dharma. She doesn't know how to understand it. So she has practiced generosity in previous lives. Here she has a wealth of good food, warm place to sleep, people, humans who love her, a kitty who wants to be friends. But she has no way to really realize and understand the Dharma because she, keeps wanting to hunt. She keeps wanting to, harm other sentient beings. But she was generous in a prior life, and so this is how it's ripening. So she can't really use it to cultivate the conducive circumstances to practice because this is how it's ripening in this kind of life. So the other thing that plays an important part in ethical conduct with our motivation is most crucial is that we must never seek a good reputation or praise. Because from what I can gather by looking at our teachers who practice pure ethical conduct is that we really want to be around them. You become very attractive to sentient beings when you practice ethical conduct. They'd like to be around you. They know they're not going to get stolen from. They know they're not going to get harmed. They know they're not going to get divisive speech or gossiped about behind their backs. And so you become very attractive to sentient beings and they want to be with you. And so the temptation to try to seek a good reputation or praise will always be present. These afflictive states of mind and the self-centered thought is going to be with us until way, way, way down the Bodhisattva path. The wise, and this is from the Great Jewel Heap Sutra that advises, the wise persuade others to do good. Fools are always for evil. It is better to be scolded by the wise than to be praised by fools. So remaining humble is essential. Avoiding being arrogant because of the purity of our conduct. So, even though we're doing quite well with our conduct, if we get a little bit too full of ourselves and how we're doing, It increases the self-grasping ignorance and decreases the ethical conduct. So we have to be vigilant not to let pride sabotage our ethical efforts. And that's why when we do our precepts, we have that dedication by having the flawless ethics of the Dharma, pure ethics and ethics without conceit. May I complete far-reaching ethical conduct. That's what we're looking at. And the most excellent way to eliminate conceit and purify our ethical conduct is, on whatever capacity we can, is to meditate on emptiness. Looking at the I, the self who is practicing ethical conduct, who is abandoning the destructive action, to see the emptiness of the object that is being abandoned, that is the destructive actions, or the ones that are being cultivated, which are the virtuous actions, with regards to whom the person who could have been the recipient of the harm, the field with regard to whom the destructive action is abandoned. So we're looking at all the sentient beings that we are not harming, the ones that we are benefiting, and to seeing them as empty of any inherent existence. So being bodhisattvas in training, we need to know what it means to practice and what the practice is. There are certain kinds, Geshe Zopa talks about this, he has a beautiful summary at the end of this chapter, and he says that there are certain kinds of far-reaching practices that are too advanced and too difficult for us to practice right now. Like that one about giving our bodies, or the story about the Buddha when he was a bodhisattva and there was that one man on the ship that was going to kill everybody, so he killed the man on the ship and took on the karma. I mean, these are practices that are way down on the bodhisattva path. And that Geshe Zopa says that we can aspire to be able to do that sometime in the future somewhere. But for now, we recognize where we are in our capacity, like refraining from harm. Maybe we refrain 50% of the time one day, maybe the next day 10% of the time. Then we improve little by little. But he says the most important thing is to do it with awareness and to do it with joy. Because we are creating the causes and conditions to become bodhisattvas and eventually become Buddhists by whatever effort, to do it with awareness and joy. The mind can be developed to an unlimited extent once we start and if we keep going. From a small start, we can accomplish something immeasurable. This is how Geshe Zopa ends this chapter. It's just so inspiring. You know, he's so much into little by little is good. Do not underestimate the power of creating the causes. And he also encourages us first to learn how to cultivate what to abandon, what to cultivate and do it daily, and to include purification in our practice. He says that's so crucial, because if we slip and we do absolutely nothing virtuous for the day, or we do a little bit, is to be able to use that as one of the ways to counteract, which includes knowing that we've made the mistake or that we were unskillful, and to have the regret for the harm we may have caused, and the determination to the best of our ability for however long we can honestly make the promise to not do it again. So this is how bodhisattvas began. This is how they started, and we have to always remember that. They started right where we're starting. And that our efforts will produce what we want. We'll be able to generate bodhicitta at whatever level is true for us. Our compassion, our kindness will grow. And this is for the long-term goal of not just being bodhisattvas somewhere in the distant future, but then to actually create the causes and conditions for our own awakening. And so the practice of ethical conduct is absolutely crucial if we are going to follow the way of the bodhisattva. And so, and to do it with as much joy and awareness as we can, and to generate bodhicitta as best as we can. And so that's what I learned from Geshe Zopa and Venerable Chujin this week. It helped me a lot with being inspired, and to see that I've seen some improvement in my own mind over the past few years, because I have been trying to practice what my teacher has instructed. And so I hope that all of you will be able to see the strides and the improvements that you've made in your life, and to use the 6 far-reaching practices to really strive to increase whatever good qualities you have. And so if there's any comments or any questions? So the other piece of it is that whatever virtuous activity we do, we dedicate so that we don't lose it, that we continue to build it for the purpose, not of having a new computer or a beautiful body in our next life or having lots of friends. But we want to dedicate the merit so that we can create the causes and conditions to have it for our full awakening. So we want to hold that virtue and keep it safe. So we'll do that right now. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous action spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings, dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds, always increase. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma, done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West, flourish.